Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very honored to welcome Kenneth Turan to the podcast today to talk about The Godfather, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Welcome, Kenneth.
Good to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. This is a huge thrill to have you on the podcast today. I just finished your amazing book, Not to Be Missed, 54 Favorites from a Lifetime of Film. And you picked The Godfather as one of the movies, only one of two from the 1970s.
Well, The Godfather's an easy pick for me. I mean, really, when people ask me what my favorite films are of the past few decades, I mean, I think it has to be The Godfather.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing film, and I can't believe it's 50 years. It feels like it's fresh. It feels like it's brand new.
Yeah, watching this again last night, it does not feel like this movie is 50 years old. It is just so vibrant and energetic, and it's amazing how young all the cast members are, like Diane Keaton and James Caan, and some of these people we're still seeing in films and projects today. And yeah, it's just still so fresh 50 years on.
Yeah, no, I know it's, my thought the last time I saw it, I was going to watch it last night and it didn't happen. So I feel bad about that.
Oh, no, you're good. We've all seen it many times.
Oh, yeah. But, whenever I see it, I marvel at how young all these people are, because we think of them in their mature years. We think of them in their more recent roles.
Yeah.
To see how young, people like the ones you mentioned, Diane Keaton, Robert Duvall, they were James Caan, they all were just kind of starting their careers,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, even Francis Ford Coppola was only in his early 30s when he directed this. He had directed a few films before, but this was his big breakthrough movie.
Yeah, and he famously didn't want to do it initially. He didn't like.
That's right.
He was just it was like put up a big not interested sign, and but apparently he had some financial difficulties, and the money that Paramount was going to pay him would be he needed it,
right.
And he said yes, and as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting in that there were so many problems and catastrophes behind the scenes, and yet it made this spectacular movie. Do you think that actually helped make the movie what it is, having all of that distress in some ways behind the scenes?
I sometimes think it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because you often hear that people had wonderful experiences on films that turn out terrible and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I think some films just are difficult to get made and some are not. And it doesn't necessarily relate to, just because you have a terrible time doesn't mean you're going to have a great film.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this was not one of those film productions where everything was going smoothly all the way through. It's definitely...
No, there's a wonderful story that Coppola would have nightmares that Elia Kazan would be brought in to take over from him because things weren't going well. Everyone was anxious. I mean, no one knew they were making The Godfather, which is their next film. And, how would it turn out? And would anyone want to see it? And, when you're making a film, you really don't know, and it turned out well.
Yeah, I think even up to the end, like as the movie was being screened, Coppola was like, well, like he took that Great Gatsby screenwriting job because he thought, well, no one's going to hire me. I don't think the movie's any good. Like he didn't have a clue.
I know. I mean, you never know. I mean, I think that's one of the things that lures people to the movie business and frustrates them, but keeps them coming back. I mean, it's like gambling. You never know what's going to work. You just do not know. There is no formula there, at least until Marvel started making movies.
That's right.
There is no formula for making something that people want to see.
Yeah, exactly. So can you take me back to, like, do you remember when you first saw the film? Like, how did you see The Godfather for the first time?
I can't remember. What year did it come out?
So it came out in March of 1972.
So I was at the living in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I think I saw it in a theater. I don't think I saw a screening. I was doing some film reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I saw a screening, and I don't think, I mean, sometimes you see a film that immediately blows you away. I think for me, this film grew on me gradually.
Okay.
I always thought it was very impressive, but it's how good it actually was came to me slowly. Over the years, I kept thinking about it, kept seeing it again, kept being amazed by it, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So when did you start to recognize that this is one of the great films? It was many years later.
No, I wouldn't say many years, but I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah, we're talking 50 years. So I
Right. It's
can't
a long
remember
time.
exactly. It wasn't like, I wasn't on the road to Damascus and got hit by some revelation like, oh my God,
Yeah.
just gradually. And, yeah, I mean, it just came to, it just, I think that's one of the tests of things is how they sit with you, how they last with
Mm.
you. You think
Mm-hmm.
on seeing them, do you feel, well, I want to see it again? That was
Mm.
really something, and one of the things that I think everyone who knows The Godfather has had a similar experience, which is that, you're kind of in the days when you were, well, we still do it, but with the remotes, you're switching channels and you want to see what's on. And you come across The Godfather is screening and you say, well, I'll watch 5 or 10 minutes. I like that film. And you find out you cannot leave it.
That's right.
No matter what else you thought you were going to be doing with your day, you are what this day is going to be devoted to watching The Godfather. It's so well made. The story is so compelling. You cannot not watch it once you've dipped your toe in it. And I think that's once I started to realize I had this experience once or twice, and I said, boy, there's something going on with this film. I mean, like I say, I always liked it. It wasn't like I
Mm-hmm.
was a scoffer, but how good I feel it is now came gradually. And I think that's the mark of something. Does something have staying power?
Mm-hmm.
Am I thinking of it 10, 20, 30, 40 years in?
Mm-hmm.
Am I still saying that's amazing? Well, that's amazing in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's one thing to see a film right when it comes out and consider if it's a good or a bad film. It's really looking like decades later. Does this movie hold up? Does it still works today? Does it still work today? And I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of the nature of my podcast is looking at films from 50 years ago and how well did they hold up. And I've looked at a lot of films since I started this in 2020, and The Godfather is one of the very few that still is just as brilliant today, right, as it was back then.
That's a key point. You don't have to, usually you say, well, today they wouldn't do X or today they would do Y or this particular plot device
Right.
doesn't as well as it used to. You don't do that with The Godfather.
Mm.
Everything in it seems to function the way it should from that day to this. It
Mm-hmm.
has not lost a step, to use, a sports writing analogy. It's still as fast and nimble
Right.
as it was when it first came out.
And it's such a fast 3 hours too. I guess at one point they wanted to shorten the running time to like 2 hours and 15 minutes. And they played that cut for a few test audiences. And they said it actually felt slower and longer at 135 minutes versus what it's like 175 minutes.
Oh, I didn't do that. No, it's amazing. It does not feel. I'm actually hearing you say how long it is kind of shocks me because I just think, well, this thing is like, a pre-code movie. This is like 70 minutes, it just zips right along. It is probably the fastest moving 2+ hour movie I may have ever seen.
Yeah, those pre-code movies. I love that you included I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang in your book. That's one of my favorite films. And I was really
Oh,
just
yeah.
so excited to see that in your book too.
Good, good. Oh, I love that film. That's another film that's remarkable to this day.
Oh yeah, that's another one that feels so fresh. What, like 90 years later? Like it's just. I watched it again a few months ago. It's still so good. But yeah, The Godfather. I mean, it's amazing. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary. Like, if you had to think of like like 2 or 3 things that you specifically really love about this movie, like what kind of comes to mind? Like, what do you really love about The Godfather?
You know what I really love about it is that there is so much in it, in the sense that it covers
Yeah.
so many bases.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's almost like an entire cinematic universe. Almost anything you like in a film, you're going to find in The Godfather. I mean, and one of the main things that I was thinking about, in preparation for talking to you today, I was thinking about the film. One of the things that really strikes me is that it's simultaneously it's a mashup of 2 kinds of films that you wouldn't think would go together. You can say that about a lot of different aspects of it, but the ones I'm thinking of, I mean, number one, obviously it's operatic. It's larger than life.
Right.
These shootouts and these plots and these rivalries and these betrayals, it's operatic, it's Shakespearean, it's very big.
Mm-hmm.
It also has elements of what they used to call kitchen sink cinema, in the 50s and 60s, things that were set around a kitchen table that were very intimate, were very domestic, that were very family oriented,
right,
that were very true to family life. And to have successful versions of both those things in one film is pretty unusual. Most films don't even try to do both. They say
That's
they're
right.
going to be operatic, or they're going to be, we're going to be a small independent film that plays at Sundance, or we're going to be this huge operatic film,
Hmm.
big shootouts and big emotions. And The Godfather successfully does both things. And it's hard to think of another film that does both things so successfully.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You talk about in your essay about the nature of duality in this movie, and that's kind of a dual element too. That we have these operatic moments like Sonny's death, which is so big and gruesome and horrifying, but also these very quiet scenes, like that scene that Robert Towne wrote between father and son. It does have all of these elements and it balances it so well, something that very few movies do.
Yeah, and even the one of the obviously the scene that's always in everyone's mind. I mean, I love the theme that Robert Towne wrote at the end in the garden. That's a great scene.
Hmm.
But the long wedding scene that
Right.
opens, is another example of a lot of different kinds of dualities, even in cinematography.
Mm,
It's the
right.
scene inside, the Don's office is very dark. It's funereal. I mean, Gordon Willis, the cinematographer, was
Mm.
called the Prince of Darkness, because he loved dark scenes. But the wedding itself is sunlit. It's very full of life.
Hmm.
Even in this
Dancing.
one, you know, scene that starts everything off, you've got it dark and light. You've got both things going on from the get-go.
Hmm. Yeah, let's talk about the opening. It's that opening shot is so haunting, and I love how long Coppola stays on that opening shot. Like we could cut to Brando sooner, but we stay like on on the first guy talking for a
Yeah,
while, and I feel like there's some confidence there to
yeah,
not feel like I have to cut to Brando
exactly,
too quickly.
exactly. He knows he's got Brando. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to show up to everybody.
Yeah.
He knows he's got him. And that opening line, I think, is the more I see the film, the more I think that opening line says a lot about the whole nature of the film, where the guy says, "I believe in America."
Hmm.
And the whole film is really, in some sense, about it's the dark side of the American dream. What it means to believe in America. Is
Hmm.
America something that you can trust to believe in? You know,
Hmm.
where do you stand in America? What does it mean to be successful in America? What's it okay to do to be successful in America? And they have a contrast with the way things worked in Italy, where they had, a lot of people died, but there seemed to be
Hmm.
some kind of codes of honor. Do those still work among the criminal element in America? I mean, there's so much in that one line. I believe in
Mm.
America.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love that opening sequence with the wedding. I feel like today, like the filmmaker would be forced to cut that down a lot. And I really like how long it takes because it really does set up the world of the movie, and you recognize a little bit at least of what each major character in the movie is about, including Michael, who comes to the wedding late, and he comes with Kay, and like you just get a sense of who everybody is. We're not rushing to the plot. I really like that about the movie too.
No, I think you're right. They would have had to cut it if say, look, guys, it's 20 minutes. We can't 20 minutes, but so many elements begin there. And, the one little scene that I always mention is that the scene where the girl dances on, I think it's Tessio's shoes,
Yeah.
this huge
Hmm.
hulking lobster, and this like 5-year-old girl or something standing on his shoes and dancing with him, and they're both very serious. And the whole scene about where I think it's Luca Brasi, is it? Who
I think so. Yeah.
says, may your first child be a man child,
A
keeps
masculine child or
rehearsing.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a masculine child. That's right, a masculine child. And keeps rehearsing. They keep going
Yeah.
back to him, and he's still rehearsing this not very complicated speech. Again, there's brilliant character moments. I mean, it almost sometimes I feel when I talk about it, I wonder if, and it sounds like from what you read that they didn't really know how good a film they'd made.
Hmm.
When we see it now, we say this is amazing, but I think they were so worried about all kinds of things, it might have gotten by them
Oh
initially
yeah.
that they had made this, incredible film.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand that a little bit. I could see watching the first 20 minutes with an audience for the first time, and Coppola is like, "Oh man, this is a long sequence. Like, they might check out. I might lose them." And we don't. Like, we're interested in every character and what's happening. And as you mentioned, that duality between the scenes with Brando in the dark with the wedding, it's just so intriguing right from the get go.
Yeah. And even Brando's character, I mean, it's both, he's got that same duality. I mean, it's both real. There's a certain amount of realism there,
Hmm.
especially the scene in the garden you mentioned, at the end feels
Mm.
very realistic, where he says, Michael, I always thought you would be the one who'd be,
Yeah.
I think you'd have to do what I did. I thought you'd be, the governor, you'd be one of the guys on
Yeah.
top. But so much of there's a lot of theatricality in the way he plays the Don, especially at the wedding, fooling around with the cat and all this stuff.
That's right. He's got that kitten in his hand.
So I mean,
yeah.
even Brando goes to different levels in different scenes.
Yeah, I love all the specifics, and there's nothing just kind of generic about anything happening. It all kind of serves the characters and what's going to happen next. And Sonny grabbing that bridesmaid and taking her into the house, and just all these little details that tell us so much about the characters even before the plot has really started. It's kind of cool.
Everything gets prefigured, and in a way that you don't see until the film is over. But even as you say, Michael showing up, going his own way, Michael being impulsive, Michael coming late, Michael bringing this, woman who was not part of this extended Italian family, and showing us that he's going to do things his own way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel that so much when it's happening, but later you see, Michael has shown us from the get-go that he was going to have his own insight on things. He was not going to do things the way everyone else thought he would or should.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just think that sequence is great. And then we move into the horse head sequence of the movie, which is pretty early on. I forgot how early it is in the film. Like, what are your thoughts on that sequence and the reveal in the bed and all of that?
Well, Coppola used to joke, I'd read that, people cared more about the horse than they did about the people.
That's right. I think yeah.
I think, it's a shocking scene,
mm-hmm.
but I think it's a great scene. I'm not always a huge fan of shocking scenes. They shock me. And sometimes I don't know that I want to be shocked, but I think you don't see that scene coming. And it's just really a powerful scene. And again, it sets up the Don and his people.
Mm-hmm.
They will do anything. They will do anything.
Oh, yeah.
Mess with these people. These are not, blowhards. These are people who follow up, who have no, intention of playing by any rules you can think.
Yeah, and I love that it doesn't happen too fast. Like, I forgot there is kind of a long sequence with Robert Duvall, and he's like kind of dining him, and he's taking him outside of the grounds of his home, and it's not like it just goes from they ask him and he says no and then horsehead. Like, it's like a good 5 to 7 minutes. Like, we really work our way up to that moment.
And I think I read, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think I read more recently that house that it was shot in used to belong to William Randolph Hearst.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of who made a lot of movies, was, the patron of Marion Davies. He had his own production, Cosmopolitan Pictures, that released through MGM. And so even the house has kind of movie connections, which I think in retrospect is kind of nice. I'm sure they didn't care about that. They picked it because it's the kind of house they wanted. But it turns out, I believe, to have been William Randolph Hearst's house.
Well, that would make sense, right? Yeah, I love the production design in this movie. Just like in New York, when we're in front of the department store and it's Christmas time, it just feels so authentic in this movie. And I know they didn't have a huge budget for this. So what do we think of the production design overall of the movie?
Oh, I think it's great. One of the things I read that I couldn't believe, but apparently they considered other cities. They considered Cleveland, God knows what they considered. But, this is such a New York story. I mean, you can't imagine it in another city. And I think the production design, like everything else in the film, is just top notch. And I can still see the little fruit, like the fruit stand where he gets the, what is it, tangerine or some kind of orange tangerine before he gets shot.
Yeah.
That's a great scene. I can just picture that little fruit stand. It feels so authentic. I saw stands like that when I was a kid. I know what they look like, and that's what they look like, and very authentic in its use of New York.
That's another example of just great details and specificity, like the specifics of that moment, of not only him falling onto the fruit stand, but also Fredo fumbling with the gun. Yeah. Right. I really love that. It also tells us about Fredo's character there. And I feel like if he had just like fallen into the middle of the street, the scene would not have as much power. There is something about falling onto a fruit stand.
Yeah, it's upsetting the natural order. You know what I mean? He falls on the fruit stand and everything goes every which way. And, also, I mean, I think, one of the sadnesses of watching this film is the knowledge that John Cazale, died way too young. Right. He was just a brilliant actor. You can see it in his Fredo. And, he was just great, and obviously continuing on to Godfather 2, he's
Hmm.
great in that as well. But we don't have a lot of great films with John Cazale, and we treasure the ones we have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Famous for being in 5 feature films, all of which was at least nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. I think might be a
That sounds
record.
right. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. I mean, talk about if you're going to be in 5 films, he picked 5 really good ones to be
Yeah,
in, right?
no, no, and he was terrific in all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I also loved about this movie, watching it again, I forgot how much the movie Marlon Brando is not in. And yet you feel his presence throughout the movie, even when he's absent for 20, 30 minutes plus after the shooting of Don Corleone. Like, what is it about Marlon Brando that makes this movie what it is so special?
Well, he is an extraordinary presence. I mean, first of all,
Mhm.
he's a great actor,
Right.
one of the great American actors of the 20th century, scrum actors. No one argues with that. And, so he has a great presence. And also he has that skill. And also he has this lifetime of film roles behind him.
Hmm.
He brings an entire screen career with him. So you really feel him in a way that if it was just some new actor you hadn't seen before, you wouldn't feel quite the same way.
Hmm.
And he inhabits those opening scenes so forcefully, the scenes in the
Hmm.
funeral, not in the funeral, the scenes in the wedding.
At the wedding, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, at the beginning, that you just don't forget about him. He's a hard character to forget. And
Yeah.
just little things he does, I mean, almost the things he does to make himself more human, like playing with the kitten, almost make him more sinister.
Mm.
I mean, it's a very magnetic performance, and it's a performance of a master actor.
Hmm.
Even though it's not a big harumphing scene where you're like declaiming some kind of Shakespearean soliloquy, but it's almost a master class in acting. How little he does, yet how much impact what he does has on the audience. He knows exactly how the audience is
Hmm.
going to be reacting to him. I mean, I think one of the things you read about Brando is that, I mean, I think it came so, he never really, I think acting came so easily to him,
Mm.
he never felt that it was like worth his time. He was
Oh, okay, yeah. Hmm.
conflicted about being an actor, from what I've read,
Hmm.
and I think partly it's because it came so easily to him. This was, I mean, everything he did was just, like falling off a log for him, yet it's exceptionally successful, exceptionally, effective.
Yeah, such amazing instincts throughout the movie, and that idea of duality. There are moments where he's so soft, he's such a great family man, but at the same time you are kind of scared by him. Like,
Oh
there is
yeah,
this intimidating factor, the way the way he talks to that guy. He's like, act like a man. Like you have the sense like he could kill anyone he wants at any moment, but he's
yeah,
also just like a soft family guy who cares about his kids and wants his kids to do well. And so
yeah.
it's just an interesting character all the way through.
Yeah, well, it's business for him,
Yeah.
and people as part of the business. It's just it's like they don't joke. It's just business. Nothing personal. It's just business, and I think that's the way it is for him. It's just business. This is how he learned that this business was run, and now he
Hmm.
runs. That's what he has to do, and he thinks nothing of it.
Yeah. Well-deserved Academy Award win for Best Actor that year for Marlon Brando, although he did not accept the award. He did win the award.
Well,
That's.
again, he has this duality. He was never quite sure what he thought about acting as a profession.
Hmm.
And it's kind of there's a very interesting, I forget the name of it, there's a very interesting documentary on Brando that
Mm.
makes use of tapes he himself made that were
Ooh,
released a few years after his death, and I'm blanking out on the name of the film.
okay.
But if you Google Brando documentary,
Documentary.
you can find this one, and it's quite fascinating to hear him talking about his own, his pressures, his demons, his
Mm.
work. It's quite a good documentary, quite revealing.
Oh, I would love to watch that. Yeah, I'm fascinated by his career and even his later career, where there are all these weird stories about how he'd just be reading off cue cards and things. I don't care how he got to his performances. He's always, even in his lesser work, I've always just really responded to him as an actor. He's really great.
Well, he's usually gifted. He just didn't know quite what to do with that gift. But he had the gift, whether he wanted to use it to its fullest or not.
Yeah.
That's why even these lesser roles where he's kind of just goofing around the island of Dr. Moreau,
That's right.
there's still something in him at least that's worth watching. Maybe not in the film as a whole, but in him at least.
Yeah, there's that great documentary I watched last year about Val Kilmer, and they had some footage from the making of Island of Dr. Moreau, and there's some stuff with Brando and that's definitely worth a look. Yeah, so he's amazing in this. Let's talk about Al Pacino, which this was, of course, his star-making performance. Like, what does Al Pacino bring to this movie that makes it what it is, do you think?
Well, one of the things I think about with him, and again, as you say, it's a very early role for him.
Mm-hmm.
He's basically known as a New York stage actor. He'd
Right.
made a few films. He co-starred with Patty Duke in something, which is
Yeah, me, Natalie.
yeah, one of those fun facts,
Yeah.
But I think the thing with Michael and the thing that Al Pacino brings to Michael is that he's opaque.
Mm,
Can't really tell what he's thinking. He's the opposite of Sonny, James Caan's Sonny, who is
right.
very obvious, exactly what he's going to do, exactly when he's going to do it, and exactly how he's going to do it, which, in the end gets him killed. He's so predictable, it gets him killed.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Michael is the opposite. You never know what he's going to do. You can never, there's no expecting him. He's thinking on his own level. I mean, that's why the whole idea, one of my favorite, character moments from Hollywood past is Sterling Hayden as the New York City police. I think he's a captain who
Mm-hmm.
had a meeting with Al Pacino.
Yeah.
And, and Pacino says, I'm going to go there because no one's going to expect it's going to be me.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, he knows himself in ways that no one else knows him. He's able to kind of mask his motives, mask his strategy. I mean, in the end, this is one of the reasons why he's so successful, because no one can figure out what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every actor that can kind of convey being opaque, being hard to read, and still be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We're interested in it, maybe precisely because we can't figure him out. But we never say, "Oh, what's the deal with this guy? I'm tired of him." You just like everyone in the movie, you're trying to figure out what's Michael thinking, what's Michael going to do, and no one's able to do it, including us.
Yeah, I would say the character arc of Michael in this movie is maybe the most fascinating arc of a character in any movie I've ever seen. I mean, for him to say in the beginning, "That's my family, Kay, it's not me," and he's just so innocent at the beginning. And he's just like he's in love with this new woman in his life, and they're going Christmas shopping. And then to see the evolution of where he is at the end in the baptism scene as everything's happening around him, and we just like his physical look changes, his mental, like everything. It's just a powerhouse performance.
Yeah, no, it's quite as you say, it's quite an arc, and he makes it completely convincing.
Mm-hmm.
Never say, "Oh, that guy," and that could never happen. He couldn't go from A to B the way he does here, or from A to Z. You totally believe his transformation, and it really makes you wonder. I mean, again, one of the things that's so interesting about this film, and is how you can think about the characters. The characters have depth and dimension. They're not, you wouldn't unless you were a real, superhero, devotee, you wouldn't be thinking very much, to a certain depths about Thor's thinking or any of the other Marvel characters. They're pretty much as advertised. But you wonder with Michael, when he said, "That's not me, Kay, that's my family," did he totally believe it? Did he have a lurking suspicion in the back of his mind that he could be part of this family if one thing led to another? I mean, I don't know. But it's the kind of thing you think about with these characters because they are so rich, they are so fully developed, they are so well acted. You just don't get that in a lot of movies.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like when he says that line, I believe him. I believe that he doesn't think that he will ever be a part of this family.
Oh, totally.
And the shooting of his father, just something switches.
Radical. He believes it too. He's not lying to Kay.
Yeah.
He totally believes it. But there are things in him that I guess he's not really aware of that come to the fore when his father is shot and when his family is threatened.
Right.
And it's kind of fascinating to watch that happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a miracle that we got Al Pacino in that role to begin with, because it is such a rich character in the evolution. And I've read a behind the scenes about how it was like up to the last minute they were trying to get anyone else to play that role. They saw some of the Panic in Needle Park, and I think that helped. That film had not actually come out yet, but they were able to screen some of the footage. But I think like James Caan had the role of Michael for a while, like that was going to, and I'm like, watching this again last night, I'm like, I'm very happy that it worked out the way it did.
What was, I know, I can't remember what was the, De Niro was considered for something, but I think smaller roles. He was
De Niro was cast in the film as like a very small, like a bodyguard role, and then he took the movie that Al Pacino had got. It was like the gang
that couldn't shoot straight, I think.
The gang that couldn't shoot straight, and so De Niro was able to come aboard that project. And I think you mentioned in your essay, if De Niro had stayed in that bodyguard role, he would not have been able to play young Don in the sequel.
I know. Sometimes think, it's like the fates were looking out for this film. They just made sure that everything worked out the best possible way.
I worked in casting for 2 years in LA, and my boss, Valeria McCaffrey, she would say that all the time. Like, sometimes the casting gods work their magic, and the right people end up in the movie, the ones who need to be there. And that was definitely the case with The Godfather. What are other cast members? We haven't really talked about a few others. I mean, we did just mention James Caan. I think he is astonishing in this. His only Academy Award nomination in his whole career to date is for this movie. But I guess we're going to be nominated for one. This is a good one to be nominated for. He is astonishing in it.
Well, again, it makes great use of his, his energy, his physicality, his kind of larger than life sense of himself. This is perfect. Again, it's perfect casting. It turned out, I don't know how many other people they considered or what, but it turns out to be perfect casting.
Yeah.
And the other person that we haven't mentioned much is Robert Duvall.
Robert Duvall.
We mentioned him with the horse's head scene. But, again, this is a very interesting, again, hats off initially to Mario Puzo, who wrote the initial book. I mean, these characters are really interesting. There's stuff for, even though Coppola kind of, made light of the book at certain times, but really there's a lot in there. And the Tom Hagen character, the consigliere, a guy who's as opposed to all these, the film's ideas of emotional Italians, he is not Italian. He's not a member of the family. It's quite clear, but his advice is very valued. And he, it's interesting in this film where so many people are so emotional, he never loses it. He's the consigliere. He gives advice. He's measured, and that note in the film is a nice balance. To someone like Sonny, who is the opposite of measured, who doesn't want to plan things out, doesn't want to think ahead, just wants to do things. And so it's a very interesting balance to Sonny Duvall's.
Yeah, they're absolutely two opposites. Like James Caan, with the scene where he's just beating up Connie's husband, and it just goes on and on for like 2 minutes. And then you're right, like Robert Duvall is like the measured character of the movie. He never speaks out of turn. He's very, Kay comes out and she's like, "Where's Michael? I want to talk to Michael." And he's like, "Don't give me this envelope. As a lawyer, I have something to tell you." It's just like, it is so, they're so wildly different characters.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, a lot of films would not see the need to have a character like that. And again, this was so, that he saw that to balance the story, you needed someone like this. Everyone couldn't be the hothead, or it would lose interest. Who's going to out hothead who else? The other person. So I think it was a great idea. It was great to cast him, and I guess Coppola had worked with him in The Rain People previously, and with Caan. And again, some of this is happenstance. I mean, I think part of the reason he picked them is that he worked with them. He knew they were no trouble. He knew they were gifted. If he'd worked with two other people, they might have been in The Godfather.
Right. Sometimes that's how it works out. The director worked with one or two people on a previous movie, and then they end up in the next one. So just because they know they can work well.
Exactly. The movie making is so fraught that anything you can do to kind of ensure a level of calm and a level of competence. If there's someone, I mean, that's why, Clint Eastwood famously works with the same crew.
Right.
Because, he doesn't want any drama. He wants to know that everyone's going to do their stuff the way it should be done with a minimum of fuss. Yeah. And I think as a director, you want to surround yourself with talented people who are not going to cause trouble. That's a big plus. I mean, I think everyone in theory wants it, but in movie making, it's almost essential, because if people are making a fuss, it's just not good for the movie.
Yeah, exactly. I think the female performances are excellent too. I love Diane Keaton in this. She's one of my favorite actresses of all time. I did a few years back where I just watched everything she was in, and her comedy, her drama. I think she's spectacular. I got to meet her once, and I got to talk to her about how much I love The Godfather and so many of her movies. And I just think she is one of those powerhouse actresses who can do comedy and drama both equally well. And it's really interesting to watch her in this very early performance, only her second performance on film, if I'm correct. She would have Play It Again, Sam the next month or two, like after this came out, but this is very early in her career.
Yeah, I think, I think the fact that it's early is the key thing. She's an actress we don't know. The things that became mannerisms with her, the things that she did where we knew what she would be doing, those are in the future. She's very fresh. She's very clear. She's very direct. It's an early performance by a really gifted person. So that even though it's early, there's nothing, it's a great performance, but there's nothing mannered about it, nothing familiar about it. In everyone's later films, we tend to see things that they've done before. And in early films, there's nothing they've done before because they haven't done anything. And I think with a lot of the cast, and with even with Al Pacino for that matter, and Diane Keaton, a lot of the cast in The Godfather, they're fresh. We haven't seen them do anything.
Right. Yeah, and same goes for Talia Shire, who is really spectacular in this too. I think that one of my favorite scenes in the movie is just that scene of her yelling at her husband and throwing the plates, and Coppola keeps the camera on this for 2 minutes, maybe longer, without a cut, and we're just roaming with the characters through the apartment, and she is just losing her mind, and he's got the belt, and it is just a shocking scene that I think is one of the film's best. I really love her performance in the movie too.
Yeah, I mean, the film goes from great scene to great scene. Again,
that's right.
You can't turn it off when you're watching it. You're waiting for the scene where there's a lull.
And there's never a lull.
It off, and you'd never get that scene. There's never a lull. I mean, somehow they managed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But you need that intensity so that we really believe it when James Caan he just starts swearing in the kitchen. And he runs out of there, and then something bad is coming after that. But yeah, let's talk about a few of the other most famous scenes, like the restaurant scene where Michael kills those two guys. Like, what do we think of that scene? I guess that was like the scene that was screened for some of the executives where they went, oh, okay, this movie's working, and Al Pacino was working. And that was like something, I think that was early on that Coppola showed, like he shot that scene and showed that scene.
Is that the scene where he kills Sterling Hayden? Is that?
Yeah. The scene where he goes to the bathroom, comes back, and there's that amazing kind of like pushing on Al Pacino's face as you hear the trains behind him, and it's coming. What do we like? Yeah, what do we like about that scene?
I mean, again, that's a very New York touch. I mean, I grew up near a subway line, and hearing subways like that is an exceptionally New York moment. Or always in your life, you're always hearing them. I mean, again, that scene is underplayed. It's just flat in a certain sense. It's not like it's just kind of the way it must have been to experience if that would happen to you. He just comes out and he does it. You know what I mean? As I remember it, there's no huge music, there's no massive, editing.
Right.
He just kills these guys. And the kind of horror of that and the everydayness of that, I think, makes it a very exceptional scene. And again, this is still early on with Michael. No one can believe he can do it. He maybe can't even believe he can do it. Everyone thinks this, I think they half think, well, we got to try this because it's Michael and, he's the Don's son. But I don't think anyone believes he can do it. But
it's like they're almost in shock that it happened.
That he pulled it off.
Yeah. But again, another bit of strange detail, how he shoots Sterling Hayden in the neck first and then the head. It's just like the details that Coppola decides on, like to how to actually kill this guy. It makes it feel so much more real, like it's actually happening.
Well, maybe the feeling is, this guy is not, a practiced killer.
Exactly. He's not practiced.
First shot, he's not going to get him exactly right with the first shot, No, it's just you'd love to, I don't know if Coppola's ever done like a scene by scene kind of walkthrough of the film, like you see on DVDs where.
He has film commentaries on all three of the films on DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah, I've got to listen to that because I'm sure that's fascinating.
Oh, they are three of the best audio commentaries by anybody. They are amazing, and I'm sure I'll watch. I've probably listened to commentary 3 times. It's just so interesting because he talks about not only like screen specific moments, but he talks about the making of the movie and his struggles. And you don't hear that from a director on a commentary very much, like talking about all the different problems. And he's just very frank about it. And it's really interesting. Yeah. So that scene's amazing. Like what, like speaking of Coppola, like anything else we wanted to say about Coppola's direction of the movie, just in general, like why was he the right guy for this? Like what did he bring to this that another director might not have brought to it?
Well, I think for me, I think the thing that maybe kept him almost, that pushed him away from it was one of the things that was really helpful to him, which is the fact that he did come from an Italian American background. And this kind of world is a world he was very comfortable in, it's a world he was very familiar with. Mm-hmm. So he could, he knew how to film in it, he knew what to emphasize, what not to emphasize. It was second, this world was, not that obviously his family were not gangsters, but the world of Italian family life was second nature to him. And I think that helped him mold the film, helped him see what would be effective, what wouldn't be effective. And, and he was really a good director. He won an Oscar for co-screenwriting. Mm-hmm. He'd made a couple of other films. He was really, he had the experience, but he also had the family. I think that family background is really important. Mm-hmm. He understood the characters, as Italians in a way that someone who did not have that background might not.
Right.
Have.
Yeah, I think his output in the 70s is pretty spectacular when you look at this, The Conversation, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now. That's a pretty good run.
Oh, yeah. No, this really, after this, he was off to the races.
Yeah.
I just saw The Conversation again recently because they reissued it with, I think they've, maybe it's anyway.
Yeah, coming up on 50 years.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's an extraordinary film. It's another film that has not dated at all. If anything, it feels more prescient because so much is about, people eavesdropping on other people, the kind of the surveillance society. This is stuff that, we talk about a lot now. And this is a film that, was there first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think Coppola needed this. This success really helped him get other projects off the ground, helped him kind of grow in his stature as a filmmaker and grow in his confidence too, because his last couple films hadn't been like Finian's Rainbow and some of these things. I feel like he needed The Godfather to really jumpstart his directing career and do all the great things he would go on to do.
Yeah, I mean, before this, his films, I mean, I think mostly people watch the films after this. Mm-hmm. I mean, earlier films have their fans, but the ones after it are the ones that are classics.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, so many great scenes. We got to talk about a couple others. The killing of Sonny. Like, what do we think of that scene? Just the brutality of it. That kind of brings to mind the ending of Bonnie and Clyde a little bit. Yeah, just that dance, the dance of the death and the way it's. I mean, he is clearly dead, and then they keep shooting him. It's like, oh my God. So, what do we think of that scene?
Well, Coppola is kind of, Sonny is, again, most people, including me, who go to the film haven't read the book, so they don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And Sonny is a larger than life character. And classically, those people don't usually die, So I think we're shocked. That's even though we half expected, but maybe we think, well, maybe he'll just get wounded, But I think he wanted to emphasize that, Sonny is really dead. This guy is life. Even though he had his flaws, but he is a force of life type character,
right?
And kind of get a kick out of him and know, he's screwed up. He's going to really die. Mm-hmm. It's almost the opposite of the scene we talked about before, where Pacino shoots Hayden, which is very downplayed.
Right.
Not cinematically, it's very kind of quiet. And this one is, again, operatic.
Operatic to the max.
He decided that maybe because Sonny was an operatic character, I'll give him an operatic death so people will be sure that he's
right. Yeah, operatic, but it's not like he has the answer. It's not like he has a heroic like jump out of the car. That character seems to always have the answers. He knows what to do. And when he recognizes that he's about to be shot by how many people with the guns, he doesn't do anything. He just kind of sits there in the car and goes like, uh-oh.
He's over. He's saying, I screwed up.
Yeah.
He's saying, I screwed up.
Yeah. But it's a spectacular scene that just, I mean, for anyone who watches the movie, that's one of the images that you can't ever erase from your mind.
Yeah. as you say, you know, echoes probably intentionally of Bonnie and Clyde of
Mhm.
what happened to the bodies there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I couldn't find anything where Coppola mentioned Bonnie and Clyde, but I can't imagine that he wasn't thinking about the ending of that movie at least a little bit, maybe in the back of his subconscious, like
In the back of his
while
mind.
designing
Yeah,
that scene. Yeah. And
absolutely.
then and then we get the death of Don Corleone at the end. We have that amazing scene written by Robert Towne that we talked about before, and then that goes right into the death of Brando's character Don Corleone. Like, what do we like? Speaking of duality, and like just him being so playful with that kid. Like, what
Yeah,
do we
it's
think of that scene?
that they put his final attack, they
Yeah,
mixed it with playing with the kid. You
yeah,
know, that's the most, you know, childish moment, you know, the most friendly moment, the most genial way we see him, you know, being just really a great guy with, I guess it's his grandson, is,
yeah. I think it's a grandson.
you know, that is coupled with his death.
Hmm.
That, you know, it's just you know, I mean, Coppola has just thought of all these interesting ways to kind of link contrasts,
Hmm.
you know, end of life with beginning of life, you know, happy moment with tragic moment. You know, he's found, it sounds ponderous when you say it that way, but the greatness of the film is that these things just happen and you intuit this watching it. It doesn't have to be, you know, billboarded. You don't, you know, you get it immediately without it being heavy-handed. It sounds more programmatic when you say it the way I'm saying it, but when you experience it as a film goer, it's completely natural. It doesn't feel forced or obvious. It feels like the most natural thing in the world. Of course,
Yeah.
he's going to have a heart attack after he played with his grandson. You
Yeah.
know, why wouldn't he? You know, and that's it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and the kind of the horror of the grandson thinking that grandpa's still playing, and it's like we have that wide shot, and after 10-15 seconds, then the grandson's like, oh, maybe I should go tell somebody what happened. You know, it's like maybe this isn't, maybe he's not just playing here. We should mention real quick, we forgot to mention the Sicily segment of the movie where we have Michael you know, kind of living this other life, marrying this bride, and then her shocking death scene when the car explodes. Like, what do we think of that section of the movie too? We should mention.
Yeah, well, I think this is really one of the key, you know, we talk about the death of, not the death, but the fact of his father being shot.
Right.
It's a difference for him. I think actually, when I think about it, that this is a more potent scene. I mean, this is Michael's lost dream. This is a chance at a life that has nothing to do with the family, you know, and you know, a chance of just kind of pure happiness. And when she's blown up, it becomes clear to him that I can't escape. I might as well
Right.
embrace this life. I cannot escape it.
Mm-hmm.
It destroyed my happiness already. There's no escaping it. I just have to go into it and I have to master it.
Right. That's a great point, because I feel like if that were not to happen, he might just stay happily married, living in this other place. And when that happens, you're right. He recognizes he has to come back. He has to marry Kay, and he has to take over the family business, right?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have any choice.
Right.
You know, if he doesn't go after them, they're going to go after him. They're not going to, you know, no matter what protestations he may make, I'm out of the business. I'm not my family. You know, the enemies will not believe him, and the enemies will try and kill him. And given that, he has no choice. If he
Right.
doesn't go after them, he'll be killed. Eventually, they'll get it right, and they'll kill him like they killed Sonny. You know, like they tried to kill his father. So I think that scene really solidifies in him, I think more than almost anything else, even more than killing Sterling Hayden's character, that I just have to do this. I don't have a choice.
Right.
The world, my environment has left me with no other options.
Yeah. And that takes us to the ending of the film, which is another excellent example you talk about in your essay about duality of the baptism scene and his just kind of calm demeanor as these horrific events are happening around them. And the editing of that sequence at the end, I think, is really spectacular.
Well, the cross-cutting between those,
cross-cutting, yeah,
between the baptism and the murders that he has ordered, this has been copied, I don't know how.
Yeah.
Still seeing it on shows on TV. You know, I'm streaming some kind of, you know, British detective thing, and they're doing the same thing. You know, it was, again, it's brilliant because when you talk about it, it can sound obvious, it can sound heavy-handed, but when it plays out, especially not having seen it, not knowing that it's going to be this way, not having anything like it or exactly like it before, it's a remarkable thing, to see it work out like that.
Hmm.
Beautifully edited, beautifully shot, really well thought out. It's the ending the film should have,
Hmm.
and it hasn't.
Yeah, and it has it, and it's just so beautifully done, like just the perfect way to end the movie, leading us into the very last scene where, I mean, I love that the movie ends on Diane Keaton. There's something so magical about the way that it's like we're going back to the beginning and they're calling him Don Corleone and she is not invited to the party. We're going to close the door. And it's
Yeah,
kind of like we're going back to the first scene of the movie,
that's right.
and the way that that's handled there is it takes my breath away every time.
Oh yeah. No, I mean it's just she's out in the cold. It's like you mentioned it's an ending kind of like I am a fugitive from a chain gang.
Right.
You know,
I
where there's
steal.
like, yeah, there's no going back. You know,
Hmm.
this bad thing has happened and it's just that's it. That's it. You're out of luck.
Yeah. So I
Something
mean,
changed. You didn't know was going to happen. Maybe
hmm,
Michael didn't know what was going to happen, but something all of a sudden you're outside.
right.
You've married this man for whom you're always going to be outside.
Hmm.
Doors are going to be closed constantly in your life because
Yeah.
Michael will say, okay, I told you, you can't ask me anything about my business.
Hmm.
Well, his business is a part of his life.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that recognition in her face in the last shot. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
never going to be able to be a part, at
Oh
least at
boy,
least
she's
this
been,
element of his life.
yeah, oh boy,
Yeah.
it's not that she should have known. It just things happened that were unexpected, and everything is different. You
Yeah.
know, I don't think in the beginning, again, because as we're saying, it's likely even Michael didn't know in the beginning. It was like plausible that he could have a life apart from his business,
Hmm.
his father's business. That was plausible. But by the end of the movie, too many people have died. There's been too much
Hmm.
bloodshed, and it's just not possible anymore.
Yeah.
Michael's drawn in,
Hmm.
and there's no going back.
Yeah. And I feel like if there had never been a Godfather 2 or 3, I mean, I think we would have been pretty satisfied with how the movie ends in terms of like letting us imagine what's to come next. But there we did get a Godfather 2 and 3. What are your opinions on the sequels? I know the second one was in your other 54 list. So
Yeah,
do you like the second
I
one?
like the second one. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, the second one was a film that took me a while to get, to appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
But, at this point, I think it's a great film as well. Three just has never worked for me. I know there have been recuts and there have been this.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new recut. I've heard
I have,
interesting takes on the new version. Yeah.
I think three, it's just kind of unfortunate that they made three, but, no one has to watch it. That's
Yeah, I like elements of 3. I think the relationship between Michael and Kay is really fascinating all the way through the third film, like just seeing the evolution of their relationship and where it goes. But yeah, I think most people agree 3 is a little bit of a step down, but 2 is a really spectacular film.
two is spectacular. I'm a big fan of two as well, and there's so much stuff. And again, the Fredo character is so interesting.
Yeah.
The whole Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
scenarios are quite fascinating, and two has a lot of great stuff in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I should mention Godfather 1 won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It's not every year that a movie that opens in March, right, goes on to win the Academy Award, but this was a strange year in that Cabaret came out in February of 72, and that went on to win 8 Academy Awards, including director and actress. And then The Godfather comes out in March, and then the following year, the ceremony wins Best Actor and Picture. So I think this is a very well-deserved win for the Best Picture of the Academy Award.
Oh yeah, I can't think of like I say, it's one of my favorite pictures of the
Mm-hmm.
last. It's 50 years. It's one of my favorite films of the last half century. So I think it's anything it wins is well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of wrap things up here, Kenneth, like any final thoughts on The Godfather, like looking back 50 years, like what do you think the film's legacy is? What should we be thinking about here on its 50th anniversary?
Well, there's a film. I'm trying to remember what it was called. A film that I'm blanking out the name of the film, but it was like a film that kind of mocked Hollywood.
Oh,
And,
okay.
it was like a Roger Corman type film, and it involved a studio called Miracle Pictures. And the motto of Miracle Pictures was, if it's a good picture, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
And I think there's something miraculous about The Godfather, given the process it came from. I mean, how difficult it was to make, how the wrong decisions were almost made innumerable times.
Mhm.
I mean, I think to have a film this good is just, whenever Hollywood works as well as it does
Mhm.
in this. Again, this is a product of the studio system. This
Mhm.
is very much a Hollywood Paramount. You know, they bought the book early. They went through the casting process. This is a studio movie. To
Mhm.
have a studio movie turn out this well, it's really like a miracle. And
Mhm.
I think there are not that many miracles, and we should cherish the ones we have.
Absolutely. And The Godfather certainly is one. So thanks so much for being here, Kenneth. This has been a huge honor to have you on my podcast today to talk about one of the greatest films ever made, The Godfather. Is there anything you'd like to promote or tell our listeners where they can find you online?
No, I mean, I want to be here in service to The Godfather.
Okay. I
That's what.
did want to show one more time. I would highly recommend your book.
Oh, thank you.
Not to be missed, 54 Favorites from a Lifetime of Film. I picked this up a few months ago. I found it at LA Bookstore, and I just have really admired your writing all throughout the years. I lived in LA for 8 years from '03 to 2011 and read your work in the Los Angeles Times all the time. It's just such an honor to have you here, and I just really admire what you've done for the world of film, Kenneth. You're
Thank,
really outstanding writer, excellent film scholar.
thank you. It's great to hear that. And it's been pure pleasure talking to you about The Godfather. It's the hour flew by.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, so thanks for being here, Kenneth. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.